right, folks, welcome. Hi, everybody. Hello, happy people. Thank you for your patience. Technical difficulties, please stand by. Welcome. Are we, all right. I think, AV, we're ready to start the stream. If we have, are we good? Are we ready to record? Anybody? Sure. We're hoping that this is room. Anyhow, welcome everybody to B-Sides Las Vegas. You are in common ground. This talk is Russian malware in the Ukraine war, given by Chris Kubecka. She has been to Ukraine several times, back and forth the last year, and has seen some shit, I believe is the answer. So, chill out, be happy. We'd like to, as we get in, at any point, thank our sponsors, Critical Stack and Valmail, and some of our stellar sponsors, Amazon, BlackBerry, the NSA, et cetera, et cetera. Sponsors do help make this thing possible. A couple quick housekeeping things. Cell phones, we've all got them, and we are recording, and nobody wants to hear your cell phone. We want to hear Chris. Please put them on silent. Double check now, even if you think your phone is on silent. Use the mic. If you have Chris is going to give time for questions at the end. If you have a question, just stand up. I will bring the mic to you, or if it doesn't want to reach, I will bring you to the mic. But we want to hear it, and YouTube wants to hear it. If you have feedback, there's a link in the schedule for every talk for feedback. Use it, love it, we want to hear it. So with that, let's get started, and please welcome Chris. I'm out of here.
Woohoo! What a way to wake up! Yes! I'm still not awake. I'm in a different time zone. So I'm really happy to see you all in person. We're coming back one of these days post-COVID, but getting closer. And I'm, kind of glad to see the U.S. again, because I was having not so much fun in Ukraine when the war started. So this talk is going to be about some of the things that I saw firsthand, and some of the ongoing things that I'm still working on with various groups of people, computer emergency response teams, etc., and parts of the Ukrainian government. So, if you don't know me, to make this slide really short, I've written now 14 technical books. I teach how to hack shit, whether it be IT, IoT, or control systems. I have a background in nuclear, cyber industry, as well as oil and gas. And sometimes I have fancy titles like the Distinguished Chair of the Cybersecurity and Emerging Technology Program at the Middle East Institute. I always have to say with a posh accent, because titles are weird. So I like to hack stuff. So, when I first got this call in February, going, "Hey, Chris, would you like to come to Ukraine?" And I'm like, I don't know, the news looks pretty grim. They're like, well, but, we're kind of afraid of a nuclear cyber incident. You've kind of handled a few of those. And I'm like, well, it might be good if you prepare. I kind of delayed my decision for a week and then ended up on the last Air France flight to Kyiv on the 20th of February. Yay, great timing, right? And it was great before the war started. I even tweeted to some of my girlfriends going, hey, it's affordable here. They give you like a little seat thing for your purse. We got to do a girls' weekend in Kyiv. Yes! Aged like milk. So I was in Ukraine when the shit started hitting the fan, basically. And after I got settled into my hotel, which happened to be the same hotel that all the journalists were staying at, the Intercontinental, things started happening very quickly. And I will say, the same type of playbook has been playing out in most European and NATO countries right now, just following a different timeline. So we had the first grouping of attacks, which were very interesting because some of them were also used as misinformation by Russia as part of their justification to move into the West early on, or excuse me, East early on, and then the rest of the Ukraine. So we're going to talk about fun stuff, like who likes clean water? except before the Russian tanks come in, obviously they don't want clean water there. Fun fact, up until about October of last year, it was still legal to own telecommunications infrastructure in the Ukraine as a Russian citizen. They finally made that illegal for obvious reasons. But as we all know, it's very hard to change around a bunch of infrastructure. So the same stuff that was there was here when the war started. Who likes money? Woo! We're in Vegas, baby, right? Yeah, especially when a war is about to break out. You kind of need cash. The human effects of what's been going on with some of the malware that's been sent to Ukraine, and what happens when your government doesn't function very well, how you can recover from that. So, like I said, who likes cash? It's awesome. I heard some woo-woo there. So one of the first things that hit while I was in the capital city was ATM machines stopped working throughout the city on Monday, so the 21st of February. You also couldn't exchange currency very easily. So I come from a Euro country, the Netherlands, and I didn't really come with a whole bunch of Ukrainian currency, so it made things difficult. But this is one of these playbook items where Russia started instilling a bit of fear. There was Russian media saying, no, we're not going to start a war with Ukraine, while troops start building up and all sorts of stuff start happening, especially in the east. So people wanted cash, just in case. The Ukrainian government had been telling people for months to start packing emergency go bags and things of that nature, because they were actually prepared thinking, hey, with all these troops, it doesn't look that great. I don't know about you, but Russia, they're really crappy neighbors. So people couldn't get money out. Sometimes they could not log into their banking account. Now, imagine if you're like, oh man, Russian troops are surrounding us, and I can't get money out, and I have kids or family or someone I have to worry about, and I can't go north because that's where Belarus is. It's kind of close to Belarus, the capital city. Couldn't go, east because that's where lots of Russian troops were amassing. So how do you get through without this thing called credit cards and Google Pay and Apple Pay? Ukraine, before the war, it's actually quite advanced in its digital technology. So most places use a lot of Apple Pay or Google Pay. Well, what's this cash stuff? So that began. Then in the east, the province of Luhansk, all of a sudden, all of their water facilities were hit by a cyber attack. The Russian government tried to say, look at what Ukraine is doing to our citizens. They're cutting off water to our citizens. That's why we have the right to protect ethnic Russians in the east. Obviously, that was not the case. Ukraine had no reason to launch cyber attacks against the water infrastructure in the east, but things can be used and misused a lot when it comes to war. So, as I was there for the 24th, getting woken up by shelling, and as the sun rose, could see columns of smoke and more shit getting blown up, and we decided to evacuate because, it's kind of a good idea when you're told there's a column of tanks coming to the capital city from Russia, and you don't know if they're going to bomb you. And, oh, look, at our evacuation point, we can see paratroopers in the sky, and they're not Ukrainian. So it was kind of a good idea to get the hell out of the capital city. And that also meant being on a very long ride to the border. We actually chose Syria, Romania, because to the west, everyone was heading there, so there were traffic jams going to Poland. Obviously, you could not go to the north to Belarus or the east where the Russian troops were coming in. Luckily for a win for technologists, a teenage boy used his personal drone and saw the column of tanks and was able to contact the Ukrainian army, and they were able to destroy that column of tanks before they actually got to the capital city. So, win-win. Hey, that's why I love to see kids here doing hacking stuff, because, hey, proof positive you can actually change things and save lives with it. So we had a very long ride to the border in a bus. Well, we call it a bus in Europe, but it's a Sprinter van from Mercedes with that fit 26 people. My friend Todd here has a Sprinter van, and you look inside and you're like, 26 people fit in here? Yes, because we're European. So we like to squeeze into small places. So we had a convoy, a car in one of these Sprinter vans, and there were 3 people driving the 2 vehicles, myself being one of them, for driving 24 hours straight kind of thing, then trying to get to the border. By the way, there were kids. I got to set the stage, because I'm not used to kids. They don't let you sleep. Holy crud, if you're a parent, I'm so sorry. I sympathize. Whoa! Right? Luckily, they thought we were just on a camping trip. You know, they didn't realize, and I'm glad they didn't, that their home in the capital city was gone. They had no way to see their grandparents again. So camping trip it is. So we get close to the border, and we're like, fuck. Oh, it's, let's see, what's 9 kilometers? It's about 6 miles long. Just the chaotic drive to the border. Because Ukraine required an exit procedure. And when I say a 6 mile long line, that's like, oh, well, maybe you can get through in 4 to 6 hours. No. No, it was days. And the reason being, which I found out the first night we spent the night in the bus waiting near the border with the kids, who did not let me sleep, was that the border patrol in the Ukraine had been hit by a wiper virus. So when we got close enough to actually speak to senior officials at the Border Patrol, that's when I could actually verify with them what was going on, what assistance was needed, and so forth. Now, imagine the picture that you see in the news of all these cars lined up all around trying to get the hell out of Ukraine, right? But they were all on pencil and paper using a landline to double check things because the wiper virus removed their database and a series of databases. So this was a bad thing because it was really fucking cold, and there was a petrol station or gasoline station on each side of the road about 4 miles back from the border, and you know, forest, and I guess one lady did not want to wait or go to the forest, and she actually froze to death standing in line waiting to use the toilet at this petrol station. Gasoline was limited to buy, so for example, we had to leave only the seat heaters on for myself and the alternate driver to keep moving all night long, but we couldn't afford the fuel to heat the rest of the bus, so everybody just piled underneath piles of clothes, because we did not know if we would be able to have enough fuel for 4 or 5 days to wait on the border with heat. So imagine cars that ran out of gas, that had handicapped folks, that had babies, etc., etc., and there was no extra food or water or, you know, a toilet that you could use without chancing it freezing to death, all because of a malware attack. That's one thing we have to understand as technologists, is this stuff now has really real-world consequences. It isn't just a news item that goes, ooh, another exploit I can use. Well, yeah, but then sometimes they kill people. And in this case, this was one of the things. So I'm going to actually try to play this video. If not, I will talk around what it says. Hold on.
But this is the situation that happened.
This was one of our passengers.
Ago when me and Chris had a chance to go out of Ukraine. So we were at the queue, and we found out that the security, like the system, the informatic system of the border, like went down. So that's why they took a break in the night, because they didn't have access to computers and they couldn't verify documents for people getting out of the country. And at that point, Chris, who was, from what I understood, Chris, who was in the country in Ukraine to help them with cyber attacks and all that stuff, had the chance to go there and talk with them and help them and guide them through some directions. And she was also working, as we speak, on this as well. So that's why we had a chance, me being with Chris there, we had a chance to be prioritized in front of the queue and be able to cross the border in order for Chris to be able to help them further with what happened in there with the cyber attack.
So it was very interesting because we got to bypass about 3 to 4 days of waiting in line at the border. They prioritized us because it seems that I may or may not make fun of Putin, and there may or may not have been some various hit lists of people that they were trying to find. And I know during our journey we ran into Wagner Group twice, who tried to stop us and tried to shoot at us, in south central Ukraine. So this particular chap, by the way, very interesting guy. As we were trying to evacuate Kyiv, we had a group of Americans who panicked with, I swear to God, it seemed like 10 large pieces of luggage. They're like, no, we're going to unload, we'll find something, without speaking Ukrainian. And they thought that they were going to hail a cab or something with 10 pieces of luggage. So in the meantime, we found this group of 8 Romanians who were like, what the hell is going on? We were just brought here for a business trip. And when we tried to call the company, they're like, new phone, who's this? Right? And you're like, fuck me. So we loaded them on, and it turns out he's the most famous journalist in Romania. So he also documented the whole thing. The Microsoft CEO considers this now the Border Patrol attack, the first instance of a Geneva Convention violation using digital means. But if you want to follow him, he's on Instagram. He's a really cool guy. Now, with this, there are also other things that went on. No one, including Microsoft, has a position if this was on purpose or just because it had been attached to the Border Patrol. So was it targeted or not, who knows? One of the things it took out was the entire orphan database and children in the care system in Ukraine. So suddenly, hundreds of thousands of children did not have any sort of identification. Now, if you're trying to cross a border, and you might not have all the paperwork, or one of your neighbor's kids, or whatever, how are you going to cross that border when they might not have ID? Hey, yeah, I'll take some of the kids from the orphanage, shove them in my car, you get to the border. No, sorry, we suspect you might be child trafficking, because that happens during war. So what do you do? So a lot of kids could not get out because of that, because I worked with several groups who were trying to find care homes in various countries for regular orphan kids and also disabled orphan kids. They could not get out in time, had to be turned around at the border sometimes. One particular case, we had over 50 cases that had sheltered in the theater in Mariupol. And even though there were signs outside that said, you know, don't kill us, there's kids in here, the Russians destroyed that theater, and we lost most of those orphan children because they had not been able to get out before due to a wiper virus. So another case of shit. This is what technology does. Also, the Russians have been kidnapping children. There's over 200 kids who have already been pushed over to Russia. Infiltration camps. If they don't have proper ID, how are they going to ever get back after this grim war ever ends? They're now stuck in Russia for the rest of their lives. So speaking of ID, Ukraine also has this great ID application called the Daria system. And it sounds fantastic, except during wartime. So it'll store your ID, your tax information, your car registration, your vaccination status, so forth. So if you are like, oh no, I didn't grab all of my stuff because they shelled my neighbor's house and mine caught on fire, you thought, hey, let's use this Daria app. Well, the Russians started messing with it, and there were times that the service was completely unavailable. So you were hopeful that when you got up to the border, and if this was your only stuff, that you could actually get through. Because of some of these interruptions, a couple of the countries that bordered with Ukraine, one of which was Romania, one which was Moldova, said if you don't have ID, we understand, just cross the border, which was very unusual at the time. But with that, the Russians took a whole bunch of personally identifiable information. As you can imagine, privacy does not exist during a war. Just the way it is. So, it's one of these situations where, what do you do when you're trying to leave a war zone or you think that there might be safe areas? I don't know if this map will work, but we'll try it. So that shows you an idea of some of the bombing and timelines of attack. It's not the greatest one. I could have used a different map. But let's just put it this way. All the little red dots and so forth that are also entering the center part are bombs and shelling that Russia has done. So even early on, you weren't safe in particular areas. A lot of people headed to the south thinking they would be safe, and then the Russians moved more towards the southwest. So one of these things, like, what do you do? Crap. How many of you have ever studied abroad, have your children study abroad, wanted to study abroad? Yeah, quite a few, it sounds like a cool experience. So it was further complicated by the fact that there were over 25,000 international students in Ukraine when the war started. The Ukraine has been known for generations now to be a low-cost, high-quality country to get degrees and advanced degrees for the global south. So that meant that there were a lot of people from age 16 onward studying to be doctors or lawyers or maritime stuff or computer science who might not speak fluent Ukrainian, at least not yet, who did not look like they were Ukrainians, were also stuck because some of the major university areas, Kherson, which you keep hearing about in the news, Sumy, which is almost directly on the Russian border, those places were so close to the border they were taken over within hours. So what do you do if you're also a foreign national? And you've just gotten back to school after COVID. Then you're like, crap, they're trying to kill me. So there were a lot of complications with that as well. Now, there's a lot of ongoing stuff that keeps occurring. There's more and more wiper viruses. I like to say wipers are like disco. Every few years they come back and they become like a fashionable attack tool. Because this year is the 10th anniversary of a massive wiper virus, the first massive wiper virus ever used in such capacity. The Iranians attacked Saudi Aramco and almost destabilized the global economy. There's a lot of surveillanceware, and that's kind of expected, but there's also a lot of dirty tricks that are going on with it.
I'm sorry, I've got to interrupt you.
Yeah.
You made a speaker request?
Yes!
Now, unfortunately, BSides cannot condone or promote any expressions of violence of any kind, but you asked for a picture of Putin under a Ukrainian tractor. I have here for you a picture of Putin. And, one moment.
Oh, that's going to be great.
I have here for you a Ukrainian tractor. And whatever you do with this once I give it to you is up to you. I have no control
It's
over it.
Vegas, baby. All right.
Thank you so much.
Woohoo!
Thank you so much.
And be sure to step on Putin on your way out somehow. Because fuck Putin. So some of the things I've been working on is working with quite a few groups to help get people out, especially the most vulnerable folks. We had a situation of an elderly care home where most people had Alzheimer's and dementia and the staff fled. So that could be your grandparents. Think about that. So things were happening. So we've had cases where Russia has explicitly targeted some of our groups, gotten on the communications channel and go, hey, so you're going to go rescue a family? Really, let's kill the family before you get there. Or let's pretend to be a family and then kidnap you as an aid worker and charge $50,000 to get you back for ransom. Or at the very least beat the living crap out of you and leave you for dead as an aid worker because we know where you're going because of surveillanceware. And most NGOs are like, let's save people. What is cybersecurity? Let's save people. So those are the hard, choices you have to make. So those who have had contact on Ukrainian telecoms, a lot of them, including myself, were rerouted back to Ukraine and into Russia, just on our mobile phones, even though we were in the rest of Europe. There have been cases where refugees who have been public about their stories have gotten bombarded with pictures such as hacked away bodies, corpses set on fire. Yay, fantastic. And then there's been a lot of disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, and propaganda going on, especially in the former Soviet states. NATO countries have been attacked, cyber-attacked, over and over again. Some countries have had to shut off geographic access outside of their country, like Albania, Romania, and parts of Moldovan government as well. So a lot of shiznit still going on. Unfortunately, things keep getting worse. We now have a series of, because Russia seems to love to rig nuclear power plants with explosives or shoot at it. But also, what are they doing if they've now completely gone bonkers for a scorch and burn policy? What are they going to do on the cyber front? Not just to Ukraine, but to other supporting countries listed on their unfriendly list. We are now unfriendly. I'm a friendly person, unless you're Putin. Remember, step on Putin. So I did put in some references, but you can easily search. I didn't want to put too many references on. I left time for questions. Try to keep them short. No word statements like, the war doesn't exist. Yes, it does. No political statements. And so I'll leave this up at the end. Thank you, everybody. All the journalists that help. And if you like me and would like to work with me, I am looking for a job. So time for questions.
If anybody has any questions, raise your hand and I will save this Red Bull. And
Luckily I drank it.
there is no way on earth this mic is going to reach there, so if you don't mind popping up.
If you step on Putin, everybody who has questions, come here up on Putin. Yeah, just be very careful. You have it kind of rigged up. And then we're stepping on Putin.
All right.
I can hear you.
Yeah, so I'm a threat analyst at Netscope. I deal with a lot of the Russian. So I'm a threat analyst at Netscope. I do a lot of analysis on Russian malware and what comes in. And the point I've been really trying to prove is that I genuinely believe that cyber is the next aspect of war. And I wanted to ask you if that's something that you believe as well. If specifically location, I don't know how to ask this, I'm sorry. If you believe that there's a correlation between where the malware is hitting and where the kinetic attacks are going to come. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, is there a relationship between the kinetic attacks and cyber attacks? To a certain extent, absolutely. For example, we saw early on in the war that Russia had tried to take out the satellite communications and Zelensky's comms, but also satellite phones. Unfortunately, as we all know, people network segment, and there's this thing called air gap. Wasn't true. Took out the French space programs, communications, a bunch of maritime communications, because they didn't really segment satellite phone communications. Whatever. So, so before that attack, then they started another shelling campaign, hoping to be undercover, but that was not the case. So there is a relationship between the two. There seems to be a preparation with cyber and then physical something. Next question. Pop on up.
And then pop back on down.
There we go.
So one of the questions I have is you mentioned that there are no coincidences in war. Makes total sense. What were some of the rumblings, some of the things that happened beforehand that you maybe became aware of, or that maybe we can watch for? Because if Russia's not done, Russia's not done.
So there were some oddities, such as when they started switching their handheld radio systems, I was alerted. That was, I don't know, 6 hours before they started shelling the Capitol. So there were a few oddities, and also watching the meme generation coming out of certain countries that were going to be more pro-Russian started kicking off. So it was like in preparation for. So there are certain things, they want to win the hearts and minds as well as shoot anybody that doesn't agree with them. So, to do that, there has to be a process beforehand and then coinciding with it as well. So yes, there are certain precursors. I have more time for questions. Putin still needs footprints. Come on over here. Don't pee, because somebody will have to clean it up. Oh, yeah, sure. Don't be a bastard. Speak close to the mic.
Yeah, I'm not going to trip all day. Hi. I was paying attention to the buildup of the war, and even in January, the analysts that I was reading basically had the start date of the war within a 48-hour window. They're like, it's going to wait till after the Olympics. It's going to be right in here. How much of that, are you aware, was Ukrainian intelligence, and how much of that was just the entire international community, putting all their resources together to nail this down?
Okay, so as the war started building up, there were lots of people who said, hey, it's going to be on this date or that date or whatever, which was a good move on Russia's part because they're like, hey, those are the days we're definitely not going to attack. We're going to make them spin up, get all their people tired. When you have to do these things, you get kind of fatigued. Also, it allowed for the Ukrainians themselves to go, oh man, this is always in the news. Maybe they're right about media not being the greatest because the Westerners keep saying there's a war and there's no war yet. So complacency. But at the same time, some people don't understand Putin really likes numerology. So when the first Russian troops started going through the east, stepping over that border, which was on 22nd of February 2022, he loves doing things like that. Look at when they started moving into Georgia. Yeah, it's great. So that's when the first big escalation occurred. So yeah, there were a lot of things said, but you see, they didn't think about numerology and all the yes men and a few other things when the war started. So, I don't know. Hope that answers it. I still have time for more questions. Putin loves to be stomped on. Come on up. I mean, he also likes other things, like big burly men with no shirt on.
Okay. One of the questions I have is the relationship between Putin utilizing, we see the use of hacktivism, but also the engagement of the ransomware gangs. And to what extent did you see that being used, and how would that carry forward?
So, fun fact, about 2 years ago, Russia decriminalized basically any hacking that occurs in Russia as long as it's outbound and it does not affect Russian entities. Yay! So, this has been going on for a while. I mean, if your I'm going to hiccup. If your country's at war, why wouldn't you use hackers? Also, if you want to get a lot of people involved on your side who are hackers, are not going to use a lot of exotic tools. It's going to take too long. It's going to cost too much. But ransomware, yay! You just got to tweak a few things. You don't have to get the money. You just have to destroy. So, yeah, I think more and more this is going to occur. And, the 2020s suck. So, yeah, there you go. Come on up. You're easier to come up this way. Don't trip on your way back. Please, for the love of God.
Given your
global experience, I'm curious what the level of sophistication from the Russians is. They obviously seem very motivated, but how technically savvy are they?
They are not very technically savvy. And they also don't necessarily understand Ukrainian culture or the language necessarily, because there's been a lot of very weird attacks. Was it last week? I think it was last week. I'm so tired from jet lag. Maybe it was the week before. I was at MCH 2022, and we had a panel on some of the things that were going on in Ukraine with one of the panelists remote dialing in from Ukraine. And so she went through some instances where there was a spin on a government entity name for a website that had nothing to do with the government entity, and because that's more like a colloquialism for Ukrainian, they were attacking those instead of some of the actual government websites. So in her opinion, most of the stuff that they've seen is not very sophisticated. So I have time for some questions. I have got one up here, and we'll start getting you lined up. Come on. No. Keep. Just don't trip.
Don't trip. Stop on this guy.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is a follow-on from the previous question, which is, if Russia's not particularly sophisticated, was it that the Ukrainian infrastructure wasn't well designed, or I have to ask the question because.
Yeah, who thinks that the U.S. government, the pentacle of cybersecurity, is prepared to go to war right now with its infrastructure? For the record, nobody raised their hand. So before the war, there was already a struggle. And people just accepted that cyber attacks would happen. Like when, the ATM machines weren't working, they're like, oh, that's just another cyber attack from Russia. We might not have electricity soon. Oh, well, Russia, because it's been expected. But at the same time, Ukraine was not a wealthy country. Well, unless you're an oligarch, that's a different story. So they didn't have top-of-the-line stuff. It was hard to keep experts in the country when the rate of pay, retirement is $300 US. Awesome. So if that gives you an idea of their pay range, how do you retain those people? And then, oh yeah, we've been at war since 2014 with the Russians. So they were in a very unique position. They were perhaps a bit more vulnerable than the US, but perhaps not. So yeah, it was a quagmire before the war. Luckily, they understand crisis and were able to get a lot of things spun up and changed over during the war. All right, next question.
So late in 2021, they were starting to clone the government websites of Ukraine. How effective do you think that was with the spread of malware and disinformation campaigns early on?
I think that they were weirdly successful in some ways with some of the cloned websites for people who didn't know any better. But, you always get those people. It's a Nigerian prince scam almost. Like, if you're going to believe this with all the misspellings, we can get you for money. It's a test. So they did do a pretty good job with some of the propaganda and all the misinformation and all that kind of stuff. So they were geared up and ready, especially with former Soviet states near the border. I remember by the time we arrived in Bucharest, I almost punched my hotel clerk because it was going around on Facebook that only the wealthy Ukrainians got out. And why on earth are Romanians helping all these wealthy Ukrainians when we have so much poverty here? And she repeated that to me. And I'm like, dude, are you serious? I'm with a family with 2 kids and they got 2 bags. That's all they own now. But it was prepped on different types of social media with some of this negative sentiment. So in a way, it was successful. In a way, like when they made this deep fake of Zelensky surrendering to Russia, people just laughed their ass off. So in other ways, they were not winning. But they do a damn good job. I have room. Let's see. Okay. 7 minutes. It's either that or you will listen to me sing cappella.
It's always nice to step on Putin, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think we as an industry can learn, and do we need to prepare for Russia in the following months? And also, yeah, you all touched on it already. Do you think Russians will start ransom destroying NATO countries?
The time to prepare was last year. But now we have a war where all sorts of stuff is hitting. NATO does not want to enter the war. So they're like, oh, go ahead and take our space satellite communications down. Go ahead and, hit all sorts of banking stuff in Finland. Sure, we're not going to physically go in this war. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on, and it's heating up. Do I think that they'll restore stuff? Well, let's see. How many of you knew that Costa Rica for about a month was held? It was held by ransomware from Russians who wanted $50 million to allow them to take in tax revenue again in some of their medical system. So I saw about 5 people. Costa Rica is a protectorate of the U.S. They don't have a military. So just being a protectorate has entered them into the war. Awesome, not awesome. Another place that Russia is hitting is in your supply chain for those small to medium-sized businesses, where it's crucial that your business stays up because you're a unique vendor. But, oh, by the way, you probably don't have great cybersecurity or do loads of testing or can afford external pen tests and a fancy Deloitte consultant who will charge you $80,000 just to shake your hand. Those are some of the areas that really need to prepare. And I wish they had better grants and easier grants for small to medium-sized businesses that need to up their security. So I have time for like 1 to 2 more questions. You can also just come up and step on Putin. I don't mind. We have one mic, man.
Can you help us understand the difference in DMPP? Can you help us understand the difference with DMPP, as in what each one of those means?
Oh, sure. So, because the industry loves fancy acronyms, DMMP, I had to remember what it was yesterday because sometimes I forget. Disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, and propaganda. So there's some subtle but interesting differences. So propaganda might be to try to get you to support certain things. Nowadays there's fake but realistic looking media websites that'll actually advertise some of this various not so great truthful information and set up propaganda as a whole. Now with that, misinformation tries to divert you. Disinformation will try to have a sliver of truth to make it believable. Malinformation is just malicious as fuck. Like we've had some instances of people working for aid organizations trying to get people out of Ukraine, and suddenly they've been slandered as child pedophiles with fake mugshots put up on Facebook. And once a malicious rumor gets started, you're hosed. How do you get rid of that, right? So we've seen a lot of this go on, and it's still continuing. Yeah. So it's very unfortunate. I wish the U.S. Had not closed their office of anti-propaganda during the Bush Senior presidency because they didn't think it was important. Don't. So yeah. So there you go. I have 3 minutes.
Given your experience with Russia, how do you extrapolate that with China, Taiwan, and those other situations where we might not be able to dance around it and avoid it like NATO has with Russia?
Yeah, so I think most of us believe that China's been checking out, going, hey, how's Russia being treated? They can still get around stuff. Oh, when can I get Taiwan in my grubby little hands? Woo-hoo! Some countries have been watching Taiwan very closely. Also looking at how you can destabilize things early on before you actually have physical troops. I mean, you know, why not? If I was an evil dictator, I would do the same thing. I'm also looking for a job as an evil dictator. I'm just saying, I'd be very good at it. So things are being looked at, you know. Swords are rattling. There's Chinese jets around Taiwan right now because of the Pelosi visit. It's just another day. Nothing's crazier than nation state crazy. I thought some of my relationships were bad, but no. So there you go, folks. I will have Putin up here for the next couple of minutes until the next speaker comes up, and I will take the conversation outside.